Hello and welcome to another A Tippling Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. I'm going to give you through a walk through the front lines today and do my usual update extra video as part of this video at the end. So I'm sort of combining both aspects of what I do normally on a daily basis. It's Sunday today, so that's why I've had to do a live rather than pre-records. Just family things get in the way. That's life. Probably a lot of what you will see on the map update part of this video, you might have seen on other channels elsewhere, because I'm a bit behind, obviously time-wise, behind what other people will have already told you. The TLDR, the too long didn't read it in relation to the front lines, is there's not been much exchange of territory on the front lines, but that doesn't mean that things aren't happening. Things are always happening because this is obviously a dynamic front line to some respect, but very static in other respects. And there will be exchanges of artillery, there will be fighting going on, and it is tough. Things don't move very much because we're getting to a stage where both sides have entrenched, literally entrenched, built earthen defenses. And when you're talking about battle lines that have been drawn in 2014, those are hard to shift. And when you're talking about what's happened up in Kherson and indeed along the Kupiansk to Svatova to Kreminna front lines, there are, the forces are building themselves, digging themselves in on both sides. So actually, it's quite difficult to shift. There needs to be an overwhelming attack, I think, to really do the damage that forces require. Okay, so what has happened before I get onto the front lines? The official Ukrainian figures there see a drop in the numbers that we have seen over the past week. Still 490, still tanks and APCs and other pieces of kit being lost from the Russians, but certainly not at the levels we have seen over the last few days. And we'll talk about one example of why the levels might have been so high previously. Uh, let's go to Russia. A group calling itself the People's Movement of the Legion Freedom of Russia claims it has caused this fire in Yekaterinburg. They claim these are fuel tanks on their way to the war zone. And here the original post by the People's Movement of the Legion Freedom of Russia, translated into English. I won't read it to you, but this is interesting that they're now kind of formalized saboteur movements within Russia doing this kind of stuff. This is almost certainly Ukrainian. Something's burning in Belgorod. So there appears to be in Belgorod, which is just over the border, sort of northeast of Kharkiv, an oil depot or an oil refinery or some kind of oil structure there is burning, and it's not looking good for Belgorod. So that is the Ukrainians trying to get a little bit of revenge on Russia there. Ukraine's army releases details of a significant hit on a Russian command post. The reason I put this here is because this was a claim I made yesterday that a refrigeration plant in occupied Melitopol. So just to let you know that Melitopol is down here in the middle of the kind of occupied areas of the Zaporizhia Oblast. Oblast is a sort of county or region. That this is the Zaporizhia Oblast. Melitopol is there. There's quite a lot of partisan activity there. But here we're seeing, yesterday there was a refrigeration plant that was hit, and they published these photos claiming that 50 invaders were killed or wounded, and 90 pieces of equipment were destroyed or damaged. So that is a huge hit for the Ukrainians on the Russians there, and they're going to be super pleased with that. So that's just to put some meat on the bones that I said yesterday. Ukrainians claiming to have shot down 2 Ka-52 Alligator helicopters. They seem to be dropping like flies at the moment, and 1 Merlin UAV. This is stated in the summary of the General Staff. On the flip side, the Russian claims that there was a MiG-29, Ukrainian MiG-29, but it was shot down, quite considerably far back from the front line in Kherson. So, I haven't seen anything else other than sort of pro-Russian sources report that, but it could well be true. Right. This is interesting. So, according to The Insider, which is a media outlet, over 500 recruited convicts died in the past 2 months, with overall Wagner losses of 800 to 1,000 mercenaries, indicating convicts comprise a large proportion of Wagner's forces in Ukraine. So, as I told you previously, and all over the media, that Wagner PMC were recruiting from prisons because they had a recruitment problem, and we are now seeing that over 500 of those convicts have died in the past 2 months, with Wagner losses of 800 to 1,000. Now, these figures here, interestingly, do not include Wagner figures. I don't know how they differentiate the two. I suppose it's knowing where Wagner are operating and not counting those predicted figures in any kind of attacks in these figures. I don't know why they differentiate the two, but apparently these figures do not include the Wagner figures. So there you go. And Russia is preparing to lose the city of Kherson and the whole left bank of Dnieper. They are currently getting ready to defend the right bank. Actually, no, this is in the wrong place. So that should be all the way over there. I will talk about that at the end. So let's get onto our front lines. Okay. Let's just make sure that you're all still with me. Let me know in the comments if you can't hear me, if anything's a problem. But we are now moving on to the top, the northeast of the front line. So this is the Kupiansk to Svatova to Kreminna. Usual sort of business here. Not a lot's happening. I did print a piece of paper just to remind me. So their usual attacks, HIMARS are striking, and we are not seeing any particular swapping of territory along here. And then again, we come down. It is all about the fighting just north of Svatova, where the Ukrainians are trying to push eastwards to maybe do a larger encirclement of Svatova, and then fighting basically all up and down this line as we come down. This is a P66 highway that the Ukrainians really want because it's elevated, right? So this is higher than these. There's the Krasna River that sits in obviously lower down, and this is a sort of floodplain where these towns sit along that, and Svata as well sits underneath the kind of bluff, and there are different sort of shelves, if you like, as I've shown in previous mapping and the topographical maps. So once the Ukrainians get a hold of this highway, they will have an advantage with being able to hit things with greater range from artillery because they're higher up, obviously. Much more difficult for the Russians to counter. So this will be a really important position for them to take. So there is lots of heavy fighting going on there. Now, I want to concentrate on Makivka. So there are claims that the Russians are fighting in Makivka and whatnot, and there are claims that the Ukrainians are fighting around Ploshchanka, and sometimes you get different claims. So again, the Russians are claiming I think Pavlivka across here is being attacked by them, and yet the Ukrainians are attacking over here near Chervono-Popivka. All these zigzags, because of course you don't really control a whole bunch of fields, so you can have a kind of recon and attack force going forward here, maybe making smaller attacks, which shows up as on my map, for example, a little blue spike. But then, a couple of miles to the north of that or the south of that, you can have the Russians doing exactly the same thing, attacking the Ukrainian lines down there. So in reality, there's going to be a lot of zigzags and things going on. But Makivka has been the source of quite a lot of interesting news coming out. So let's go and just look at a couple of claims about. So Svatova, the Ukrainians are slowly grinding down the Russian defenses, according to Defmon, who does a lot of geolocation in this area. I do, however, see problems advancing when you can only use roads. We might not see any major movements in a while. So there are issues with the mud and the rains that have been, and the movement off the roads. Even if you are on roads that look like roads on maps, but they are not paved, you are going to be in a lot of trouble. So movement becomes very difficult as well. I mentioned this a couple of days ago, but I think I've not really seen anyone talk about this. The fact that, hey, we're moving in towards winter now, and it's starting to get dark, certainly around here. I mean, it's dark already, right? And we're 5 o'clock, it's dark in the UK. So it's going to be darker an hour earlier, probably, in Ukraine. I don't know for sure. I need to check this out. But what this says is that there is 5, maybe even 6 hours of light difference at this time of year compared to the height of summer. And that is the amount of time that you can actually fight, right? Without doing other things. You can still do things in the nighttime, but your general bog standard sort of infantry movements and fighting, unless you're using thermal imaging and night vision, which the Ukrainians do have to some extent and the Russians don't really, but the Ukrainians won't have that to the extent that everyone's got it all up and down the lines. There will be pockets of that kind of equipment. So there is just less time to do attacks. So things will go slower in the winter time than in the summer, where you have twice the amount of time in a day to actually do your fighting. Anyway, just thought I'd go on it. So this is a claim that has been hanging around for the last sort of 24 hours, and it's a huge claim. As Tim White says, I reported a big attack by Ukraine on Russian forces in Svatova, but I don't even think anyone guessed how big. So this is when we saw, I presume, this lent into the claims that the Ukrainian claims that the Russians had lost like 900 people in one day. And you're thinking, wow, that's a massive uptick. And you compare that to net today's like 490. What explains that? Well, here, quoting survivors, Vyorska media in Russia, so Russian media says 500 plus may have been killed. The rest were abandoned. Relatives in Voronezh protest outside local government buildings. So when you start seeing Russian families protesting about what has happened, right? You know that something has happened. Yeah. So these people deeply worried about their family members, finding out information about how a whole bunch of people have died from one particular area. So let's look at, let's flesh this out a little bit. A battalion of Russian conscripts from Voronezh Oblast was destroyed near the village of Makivka, Svatova district, Luhansk Oblast, by a Ukrainian strike. Hundreds of Russian occupiers were killed. Source Russian news outlet Vertica. And here we have wives, mothers, relatives of recently killed mobilized soldiers in Makivka, Luhansk Oblast, are asking their government to send back their loved ones, dead and injured. It's reported that out of 570 mobilized Russians from Voronezh, there were only 41 who survived, and the officers fled. Uh, Obviously, that would need to be properly verified. I don't really know what the village was that they're talking about, but they are talking about Makivka, and this is as you can see, what we've just been talking about, which is just sort of southwest of Svatova. And that's so if you've got up to 570 people dying there just in one place, that is absolutely devastating. So anyway, move on further down. We come sort of haven't really heard much about Kreminna, about sort of movements around Dobrova. I have differing claims about this forest area. Now, this is why I say Bilohorivka is so important, because it gives you access possibly to be able to facilitates control of this forested area. The Ukrainians, I've just put the line down there because it's impossible to get any decent information of exactly what part of a forest is controlled. But there are some pro-Russian sources saying actually they control quite a lot of the forest, and pro-Ukrainian saying that actually the Russians only control a little bit of the forest. But there you go. Those lines could go either way. Apparently the best Wagner units have been brought into the Bilohorivka area. They must think that this is really important, so they've drafted in some Wagner into the Lysychansk, which is this city here, Lysychansk Bilohorivka area. They are pushing back against the Ukrainians, but they have been repelled. And there was images of, I won't show it because it's insensitive, but there are images of 29 Russian soldiers just laid out on the side of a road. They were all the dead, supposedly, of just one failed Russian attack. So things are pretty hardcore around Bilohorivka. And it appears to be quite a major, if you're sending some of your best Wagner troops up there, that indicates that obviously the Russians want that. A lot of fighting in Berestovi. I made a claim about Berestovi yesterday, but I think it was wrong Berestovi, and I keep talking about like different names. You got Bilohorivka just there, and then you've got another Bilohorivka there, but they seem to be right next door to each other. But anyway, I'm sure you have a go at me saying that happens in every country. We move on to Bakhmut. Bakhmut, the Ukrainians are really well dug in here, and it seems to be increasingly so. So they did that counterattack last week where they appear to have gained 2 to 5 kilometers of buffer around Bakhmut, but the fighting is back on. There is apparently really good news of Soledar. We didn't hear any actual sourced information on that. There's just a lot of rumors saying, yeah, the Ukrainians done really well in Soledar. We'll let you know later. And then no one's really let us know. So is that kind of propaganda? Is it rumor? What is it? But it appears like the Russians appear to be saying that things are not going very well in Bakhmut. And yeah, so there you go. I've seen some a lot of footage of Bakhmut. Let's get to where I was going to go. Oh, that was more information. Oh, sorry. Just to go back to so this is a Kiev independent. Talk about that 500 or so people dying in Makiivka village. So the Russian battalion was formed out of conscripts. Yeah, I've said that. According to media outlet, the unit was supposed to stay 15 kilometers away from the front line, but was deployed there without equipment on the night of November the 2nd. So we're November the 5th now, 6th even. When Russian positions were shelled by Ukrainian artillery, Russian commanders fled from the position. According to the ISW, the Institute for the Study of War, Russian dictator Putin's plans to continue with covert mobilization suggest the partial mobilization did not produce sufficient forces for Russia's war in Ukraine. This is quite, is it this claim? Yeah. So Putin's claim that Russia has exceeded its goal of mobilizing 300,000 men doesn't stack up with this November the 4th decree that allows Russian officials to mobilize citizens without standing convictions and serious crimes, the ISW said. A statistical analysis by Russian independent media outlet Media Zona suggests that around 492,000 men have likely been conscripted since Putin announced a partial mobilization. So the claim is 300,000. We were all talking all the time about we think it's more than that. Stats, people compiling stats saying we're pretty sure it's more than that. And now there's an independent Russian media outlet saying it's more like 492,000. Anyway, back to Bakhmut. Sorry about that. I forgot to say that earlier. So in the Soledar direction, according to Rybar, which is a Russian source, this is Rybar in English, the Ukrainians commands have prepared for a possible attack by Wagner PMC assault units against Bilohorivka and Shipklivka. So actually that was Bilohorivka, even though it's quite close to Soledar. So again, exactly what I'm saying there. Bakhmut, Russian sources confirm that their troops in this front are getting exhausted and are unable to make gains due to lack of manpower and artillery support against the well-dug-in Ukrainian defenders. Frontal attacks on Soledar and Opitne continue. And this is just to let you know. So here is our Bakhmut area. Oh, I hate it when it does that. Do apologize. So here's our Bakhmut area. And Soledar is north and Bakhmut. This is where they're trying to get this larger encirclement, but they just can't get past these places. The Ukrainians are super well dug in there. So there's been all this concentration on Opitne down here, and indeed Ivangrad. And no one at the moment from both sides, I've seen pro-Russian sources and Ukrainian sources not really knowing that. We know there's a lot of fighting going on here. So I guess this is your grey zone here, Ivangrad, because no one's actually claiming that they control that at the moment. So I guess that is where the fighting is happening. But apparently it is pretty tough fighting down there. There are some claims that the Ukrainians made a counterattack down south towards Avdiivka. But they lost quite a few people and they were shipped back to Kilshivka, where there's some kind of field hospital there. So the Ukrainians didn't do too well. But yeah, there is a lot of fighting going on here. So let's go further south from Bakhmut to Mayorsk. So this is Mayorsk, and not far from Bakhmut really at all. And this has been this has been a source of a lot of heavy fighting recently. And just to let you know, this is outside of the city of Pavlivka, which is a much larger sort of settlement than any of the ones we've just been talking about. And yeah, look, heavy fighting in Mayorsk. What do I have to say about that? This is what. There's a few things I wanted to say about Bakhmut. I'll come back to that. Doesn't matter. Right, so Russia released a few videos of Mayorsk, and this is what I showed you from yesterday. Showed that Ukraine has expanded their area of control over the town. So I withdrew the area on my map, says Andrew Perpetua. On the right, you see how I had it prior to the change, and on the left, so Ukraine have taken more of Mayorsk. So just moving further into here, this is sort of railway junction. It's quite important, or at least would be in peacetime, but of course you can't use that railway at all. It's right on the front line. That is a claim from Andrew Perpetua, but then you get sort of Russian claims that actually it's all going off in Mayorsk, and that's a pretty important. No, we're not there yet. A pretty hot place at the moment, and the Ukrainians are really well dug in around here because they've had a long time to dig in. This is we're getting onto 2014 lines here, so it's going to be really difficult for the Russians to do that. There's been, I think, air activity and a lot of shelling around here, but they haven't been able to shift the Ukrainians at all. My notes are that Russians have taken heavy casualties. They're shelling Ukrainians there. They are very well fortified in around the area. Both sides claim advances. For example, so that was Andrew Perpetua claiming that Ukrainians have made advantage, but the DNR head Denis Pushilin, on the other hand, has said that the DNR, the Donetsk People's Republic Army, or sometimes the DPR, have made advances in that area. So it's who do you believe? But my takeaway from all of this is the Russians are attacking everywhere, but not really making any gains. Anyway, so we move further down south to Avdiivka, which is just outside of Donetsk here, and you might recognize that airstrip, and the Opitne and Vodyane areas as well, which is again this is where it's all happening there, but not a lot going on in that area. Bars 13, so that's a combat army reserve source, claim that Russian and Ukrainian positions near Avdiivka are only 30 to 40 meters apart, right? So that is insane. Right. And actually, I've got some footage I'll show you a bit later to indicate how close these. I don't know where the footage exactly is from, but it is pretty insane. So sorry, I haven't checked any of the chat because I've just been going off on one. Greetings from Georgia. Excellent. Good to have you on board. Well, which Georgia is that? I presume that's American Georgia, but it might not be. Okay, and so hello, thanks for everyone for hanging out. There's almost 400 of you, which is fabulous. Okay, I will get back onto my front line. Thank you, Timothy. Very kind of you. Hope to be of service. So in Avdiivka, 30 to 40 meters apart. That is insane. Really tough fighting. I'm looking forward to, and I say that in a sense of like, I know it's not going to be a film to look forward to, but I want to see All Quiet on the Western Front on Netflix, which is the German film of the book from 1929, and apparently that's pretty harrowing and show how horrible war is, the trench warfare of the First World War. I'm looking forward to watching that. In the sense that it's going to be a really tough and not very enjoyable watch, but one that is very powerful by all accounts, moving and shows you the senselessness of war, which we can look at maps like this. So this is my reminder that these are real people fighting on both sides and killing each other and their families and friends and loved ones. You know, this is terrible. This is terrible. And this is senseless. There is no sense to what Russia is doing now. Right. And I'm sorry, and especially when you're talking about beating your head against a brick wall of Bakhmut. So Bakhmut has some limited strategic, limited strategic value, I guess. And it gives you an access to this sort of flatter ground out here. And but if you've been knocking on Bakhmut's door for that long and you're arguing over meterage, and each meter is worth however many bodies, then to me that's senseless. And the same could be said for Avdiivka as well. Anyway, I'll move on to just continuing. So Marinka is pretty hot, and again, that's very similar to what we've been seeing up in Mayorsk and around. Have I got any other sources to let you know? So now we're going to go down to Pavlivka. Okay, so this is moving down around a corner here. Sorry, my multiple sclerosis means that I can't feel my fingers, so it's really easy for me to press stuff and not like I've just done twice in a row. And I just can't tell I'm doing it because my hands are tremoring and I can't feel them. But hey ho, that's life. So as we move down around this corner, we come to Vuhledar and Pavlivka just below it. Now, the Russians have been attacking Pavlivka, and they still claim, Russian sources claim they still own, 50% of it broadly. There's some people talk about this river as a line, other people talk about this road. Then I showed you evidence of the Ukrainians driving up that road with absolutely no problems at all, and a captured a T-80 Russian tank from the middle of Pavlivka to show you that really it looks like the Ukrainians have fairly safe passage through that, and probably the claims that the Russians have pulled out could well be true. And there are further claims that they've pulled right back to Yerivka. I haven't changed that on the map because I think that's probably realistic. They've been really bruised in Pavlivka. It is just basically, as I've talked to you before, it is lower down than Vuhledar. So you can basically take pot shots at that and take things out from Vuhledar with relative ease. Even like snipers, actual sniper rifles, as well as ATGMs, shoulder mounted rocket launchers, and all sorts of stuff, and obviously artillery and whatnot. And you just got a great line of vision. So it's a tough nut to crack, Pavlivka. If you want Vuhledar, which I think the Russians really realize, the key to Vuhledar is probably coming right round here. So Novomykolaiv Ivka, or however you pronounce that, is under a lot of pressure because they realize, obviously, if you can get hold of this road, although it's under partial fire control at the moment, if you can get around there and take this and come down to Vodyane, another one, then Vuhledar will be yours. But going straight through Pavlivka is much more difficult. So it claims that they've retreated back to Yerivka, but then claims that they also haven't. So who do you believe? Let's go and look at those sources. So here's one source. Lots of shelling over the whole front line. Russians retreated to Yerivka, so that's that claim. South of Pavlivka, east of Donetsk, Russia is stuck in Vodyane. Are unable to advance. So I've already told you about that. Russia keeps sending mobilized soldiers to the Marinka meat grinder despite losses. And I've talked to you about Marinka being the same pretty much as what's going on everywhere, which is beating head against a brick wall. Okay, this is interesting. So this is a Google Translate of of a Russian source saying, Russian have great losses in Donetsk. There's quite a lot of talk about the 155th Brigade. So the difficult situation in Pavlivka, they obviously, that's a Russian spelling of it. The Marines of our 155th Brigade. So these are guys that seem to have been pretty well and truly, or given a real bloody nose, to give you an understatement, to the governor of Primorie Oleg Kozhemyako. I'm not bringing the letter. The essence of it was transferred to the Russian Defense Ministry. The original is in Primorie. It is said heavy losses, the inability to convey to the top management information about our high useless losses in people and equipment. I have the figures, but then it's up to the Prosecutor General's office. The Marines asked Oleg Kozhemyako to contact the Ministry of Defense to send a commission for an urgent analysis of the situation. There are three big names in the letter, I know, but I don't give them. However, I am publishing the post myself because they have been talking about the situation in Pavlovka for several days, and the blood is still pouring and pouring. That's a really interesting insight into just this one part of all of these front lines to show you that's been really bloody for the Russians. And what have they achieved? Basically nothing. And even if they did take Pavlivka, and even if they did take Vuhledar, again, you get to the position where, was it worth it? Yeah, if they took Bakhmut now, question is, yeah, well done. How many months did that take, and how many deaths? Was it worth it? Really? What's the point? But there you go. I'm starting to rant almost again, so I'll try not to. So there you go. What else can I say? The Russian media is reporting that the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade, which is attacking Pavlivka, have taken huge losses on their assault attempts. Who would have thought attacking fortified positions in the mud would have went wrong? Indeed, and that's kind of my point. And then we move on to Kherson. Okay, so let's rewind a little bit. I just want to talk to you about, show you some, just to split things up a little bit, show you some Bakhmut videos, because I forgot to show these earlier. Sorry, this is live and I've got so many tabs open. It's all rather confusing and my brain has only got so much RAM. Here is Bakhmut, and it's just a couple of videos just to give you an insight into what is going on in Bakhmut at the moment. So here we have, I don't think we've got any sound to this, or maybe I've screwed up my sound. I don't know. But just, it's all about the visuals really. And this is, life on the front lines in a battle zone. It's, yeah. So there's one for you there. And then there's another one here. So part is, the other one was clipped from this. And had to cut the music out. It's all been sort of spliced together. But again, soldiers that have perished, and just burnt out stuff, and just all of these frontline towns that I mentioned on the map when I say, oh, they're attacking around Marinka, they're attacking around Mayorsk. You know, there are a few people hanging on to living in Bakhmut because it's large enough that a few people can get away with living in certain places in Bakhmut, but apparently even they are pretty much pulled out now. Most places like this will not have anyone living there for obvious reasons. Okay, so I think there are some things going on along the Zaporizhzhia front line to some degree. There is some fighting taking place in certain places around here, but I don't have too much information on that. I'm just going to go to Kherson, where so much conversation is had around and discussions had around what is going on in Kherson, who is doing what. So basically, you've got defensive lines being built all over the shop. So whatever Russia is planning on doing, it is going to be difficult for Ukraine to make a lot of territorial gains. Okay, it's just there will be minefields separating earthen defenses with more earthen defenses behind them. So you get a minefield, earthen defenses, minefield, earthen defenses, tanks and IFVs, and then artillery. And you're thinking, right, if we are trying to strike against that, that is going to be difficult. So this is why you hear a lot at the moment, a lot of talk about heavy shelling in the area. So the Ukrainians are trying to soften up these areas all along here, particularly around here, apparently, and also around here. A lot of heavy shelling to try and take out those defenses, but it's going to be because it's been such a long time that they've given the Russians, and people I'm sure will debate whether this was a real mistake of the Ukrainians to take so long to build up their capability to attack here. If assuming that that's what they are going to do imminently, there will be talk about whether that pause, operational pause, really played into the Russians. And my theory is that they've probably done some kind of operational withdrawal, swapped out their good forces of the VDV and the airborne forces, swapped them with the mobilized forces who are manning these urban defenses, and they will then withdraw completely, at least to the cities, maybe to Berislav and Kherson. Where they have fortified heavily, and they've also massively fortified along here. They've fortified along the spit as well. This is it the Kimburn spit? There's fortifications going on there because obviously this would be a fairly sensible place, you would think, if it wasn't fortified, for the Ukrainians to come ashore and then attack from down here. So rather than have to cross here where they can get hit by heaps of artillery that's stationed all along here, they could just come around the corner. So apparently they've been, I've shown you footage of pillboxes being put there, but apparently there are lots of defenses being built as well. So let's go and see what we can find out about Kherson. Here we go. Right, and this is a thread that I'm going to read you, so bear with me. Russia is preparing to lose the city of Kherson and the whole left bank of the Dnieper, says this guy, and gives the substantiation for that claim. They are currently getting ready to defend the right bank of the river. Remember, right bank is actually the western bank. It's as the river flows down. In this thread, I will show you what this preparation looks like using satellite images and other resources. Okay. The Russians are currently building 3 lines of trenches and bunkers on the right side of the Dnieper. Again, this is the western side. These defensive positions use natural and artificial barriers such as the Dnieper River and the numerous canals in the Kherson region. So he's actually sketched that out for you. You can check that out. Check out Benjamin Petit on Twitter. Oops. So there's a sort of satellite image that he's using. As you can see in the map above and this satellite image, they are even building trenches on the Black Sea coast. So the Black Sea coast is going to be sort of around here and possibly around on this spit. Okay, I don't know exactly where this is, but there is a geolocation for it. And there are trenches right near the coast because obviously what they do. So let's go back to our main map. So what they don't want to happen is, to put all this defensive work into defending from an attack across the river, the Dnieper River, by the Ukrainians, only to have an amphibious landing somewhere like here, and then attack up northwards. So they need to be. It's not just defending one line, but it's defending all around here for whatever attack they might expect. So where do we get to? Here we are. Okay. These defensive lines consist of trenches supported by buried positions for armored fighting vehicles. So we've seen that before. This image is of the town of Holopristan that was hit a couple of days ago. Similar defenses can be found on the three lines and along most of the length of the right bank of the Dnieper. So that is actually on. So that would be on both sides of the Dnieper River. That this is what most of the positions along the right bank of the Dnieper look like: two rows of trenches and positions for vehicles. Let's zoom in on that map. So you've got one line of trenches there. You've got another line here, and then you've got vehicles. These are where vehicles can get dug in. So you can use, whether it's a self-propelled gun, whether it's an infantry fighting vehicle using its autocannon, or some kind of 30 mil cannon, or whether it's a tank, whatever can be sat in there, have some protection from shelling, from bombardments, and cause some damage. In places where it's difficult to dig trenches, Russia has deployed prefabricated bunkers. These pillboxes I was talking about. I doubt very much the efficiency of these cement boxes. This picture, for example, was reportedly taken in Kharkovka. However, in some places, the Russians have created impressive defensive positions on the third line of defense, 18 kilometers from the Dnieper. This is defensive position was recently created. This position consists of three different defensive lines plus a canal. So he's marked everything out here, different defensive lines. They're just going to make it so tough for an assault across the river. Of course, some people are saying, well, the Ukrainians don't need to attack across the river. So it could be that the Ukrainians don't do this attack, don't even come around here, but they wait for another force that's been amassing supposedly in Zaporizhia to maybe attack down near Melitopol and do some larger encirclement. But at some point, they will have to cross that river, or in some way get across there. I'm sure there had to be some kind of reaching of the river. Here's a close up of the position. This is a satellite imagery with a resolution of 3 meters. We talked about resolution before, clouds. So you've got evidence of trenches obviously being built. I had fun for several hours mapping all the positions I saw. Keep in mind that these positions are still being built, and the satellite images don't cover the whole area, so there are holes in the lines. It's quite expensive to get these satellite images. So as you can see, he's mapping out lots of trenches being built all over the region. Satellite images are expensive. Oh yeah, and threads like this one require hours of work. So, anyways, that's really important work and interesting work. So thank you to Benjamin Patet for doing that. Russia has started to fortify the beaches of Kherson, as he just said, oblast facing the Black Sea. They clearly have given up on any offensive operations and cling to what they have occupied. This is a really interesting point. So what's going through the minds of the Russians here? Well, this is purely defensive. This is purely defensive strategy. So they are obviously not interested at the moment or capable of going on the offensive. And I don't know that they ever will be from now on, because of what I keep talking to you about, which is every week the Ukrainian forces get upgraded with new and better equipment and more equipment, and every week the Russians get downgraded to the point where there's a critical lacking of even ammunition, artillery shells, that they are going now to North Korea. They've kicked up the trains again to operate from North Korea to Russia to get shells, because they can't. And the idea was they had enough shells to last them 10 years before this war, but because so much has been hit, and they've used so much, that actually it might not be, you know, those stats don't look like that anymore. And when you get information like this, so this is going back to that Spit. Ukrainian armed forces destroyed an ammunition depot in Heroiske in the Kherson region. So this is that Spit. So you got Kherson city, and this is where they are building fortifications. Well, they've hit an ammo dump, so they've even got ammunition dumps there. Obviously, to provide troops all along that Spit, you need ammo dumps sort of all over the shop. Now, this is interesting. This came out yesterday. What does this say? So this is the amassing of Ukrainian troops. That's a lot of MRAPs, armored personnel carriers. What else can I see? General vans. Is that Humvee supply trucks? And then down there further. So, are they getting ready? I mean, why would you have that? Why would that get out on social media? So that's an interesting thing. But why would you have that amassing of mechanized equipment if you weren't just about to use it to go somewhere. It's not a parking lot. So this leads into the theory that the Ukrainians are, just about to do something in Kherson, and you put that together with Ukraine artillery, and I talked about this earlier, hammering this area since this afternoon, and that was from earlier. That was from yesterday. So that's 24 hours of probably of artillery hammering those areas. Are they softening it up, ready for that attack that we just haven't seen yet? And that's one I've already shown you. So there you go. That's what I have to say about the front lines, and then I'll go on to my nuggets now. But before I do that, let's see what you guys. I mean, I'm not going to be able to live have a look through what so many of you are saying. I'm sure you're having a great conversation amongst yourselves, which is awesome. Hello from Holy Cornwall. Cornwall, good old Cornwall, gotta love a Cornwall, and New Hampshire, and all over the world. So thank you for tuning in, guys. Really appreciate that. Is there anything? Well, you guys have a conversation with yourself. I'll carry on, shall I? Anyway, if you have, please do all the normal things like liking, subscribing, and all that stuff. If you have any super chats or anything like that, obviously gratefully received. Takes a lot of time and effort to do all this, so I do appreciate any help I can get. Okay, let's start off with our nuggets. So this is the part of the video which I normally do 2 videos. I'm whacking this together in a live where I talk about all the other contextual bits and pieces that support what we've been talking about on the front line. Okay, so it gives you a greater understanding and a more sort of useful information about the whole geopolitical landscape. Let's start with the intelligence update, and I really want to concentrate on the last sentence of it. So this is talking mainly about how so many Russian officers, like generals, like high up in the command structure, in the hierarchy, have been sacked, moved aside, changed, rotated. What does that tell you? So I talked about this Lapin chap, and I gave you a whole thread on what he had been doing and these troops that have retreated in this area and how he dealt with them. Has been widely criticized for poor performance on the battlefield in Ukraine by both Chechen leader Kadyrov and Wagner head Prigozhin. These dismissals represent a pattern of blame against senior Russian military commanders for failures to achieve Russian objectives on the battlefield. This is in part likely an attempt to insulate and deflect blame from Russian senior leadership at home. And that's the important sentence. Why do you keep doing that? Because surely someone that's worked up expertise in that position and knows that front really, really well, like, you need to keep them there unless they really are that bad. Obviously, you need to get them out, but they can't all be that bad, or maybe they can all be that bad, and the Russians have just got very bad commanders in place all along the front. But if you keep rotating them, that's not useful. What's the saying is you don't change a boat when you're rowing across a river, or something like that. The saying that, in the middle of a campaign, don't change your commander, because that's the worst thing you can do. There's a lot of that going on, but in the best way to understand that is that it's the Russian Kremlin saying to their general public, "Oh, it's going badly there, isn't it? Well, it's not our fault. It's these guys. Lapin, you absolute muppet. You need to get out. You're useless. What a rubbish general. Go. Get rid of him. Let's get someone else in." And then when it doesn't go so well again, because it's not really just about the commander, then they get rid of him. Oh, well, Joe Bloggs has done badly. And it just goes on and goes on. And this is just happening up and down the front lines. Since the beginning of the war, people have just been moved on and moved on and moved on. And they're going to start running out of anyone that's in a position to be able to do that job or do those jobs. Anyway, that's just my thoughts. Could be a load of nonsense. And bear in mind, guys, who am I? Like, literally, who am I to say this? I'm someone who's deeply interested in stuff, but I'm a philosopher doing this stuff online and hoping to impart kind of any ideas and knowledge I have, but please question everything I say. I am pro-Ukrainian, of course I am, from a moral political point of view, but I'm hopefully not pro-Ukrainian in how I deal with the facts and the claims. Like, I do concentrate more on the Ukrainian claims and give you them, that's for sure. But it's I am trying to be objective with how I deal with that, and I hope that comes across. Even though I have the baggage I'm bringing to this, I also don't want to pull the wool over your eyes, because I don't want to pull the wool over my eyes. As I always say, the easiest person to fool is yourself, so you should always question yourself and your own motivations. That's what I'm doing here. So anyway, There you go. Thank you so much to Chris for that really kind super sticker. You good person, you. And to my good old Mitch Mazarol, all the way from Canada, I do believe. A sincere thank you for your live stream today. I appreciate the ongoing efforts to help folks wrap their heads around this conflict. I really appreciate that, Mitch. Mitch is a valued member of the channel as well. So double whammy. What a legend. So thank you, Mitch. And I will give you props again later on because you are awesome. Of course. Right, let's get back to our nuggets. The EU countries transferred, or have already transferred, 500 electric generators to Ukraine to reduce the consequences of Russian missile strikes. So it's not just about providing weapons and this and that. It's the whole, the total governance, isn't it, of Ukraine? How do you, as a country, operate? How do we help you operate as a country? Yes, you need to operate effectively on a battlefield, and we need to do that. But there's no point operating on the battlefield if all your country has no electricity and water and are struggling to survive to live day to day. So on the one hand, we need to do that. On the other hand, we need to do that. And I talked about yesterday about, oh, these countries are doing a really good job in providing these weapons, and these countries have provided nothing. That's possibly a little bit unfair because it's possibly unclear those other countries that are providing no tanks or no infantry fighting vehicles might be providing a shed load of electric generators and a load of food and a load of blankets and clothing and stuff for the people of Ukraine, right? And that's important as well. And they might also be taking in a lion's share of displaced refugees. The whole thing's complicated, so it's very easy to look at an infographic of a bunch of tanks being given and say, "Oh, that country's much better than that country. Oh, America's doing a great job there, and Canada's doing a great job, or whatever." And then, oh, Denmark's done nothing, and then you think, "Oh, Denmark's actually done this, this, and this on the side that doesn't feature in that infographic." I don't know. I'm making stuff up there, so maybe they haven't, maybe they have. Who knows? Hey, some Danish person can tell me and put me straight. What has Denmark done? No, I don't mean to say that accusatorily. So there you go. Really good. An attempt to storm. So this is the two parts of this video, and I will play it to you, and it might take longer than you might want to sit and watch a video. But an attempt to storm the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in Donetsk region, fighting through the eyes of Ukrainian soldiers. So you remember when I said from a previous tweet that their claims that they are 30 to 40 meters away from each other, fighting. This appears to be the case. So these trenches they're shooting small arms fire just over the top of the trenches. It looks like to places that can only be like 50 meters away. This is pretty interesting. Almost sounds like cat guns, but they're not. Of course, that's a little bit more substantial. So he seems to be throwing. Is he throwing grenades? But nothing. He's only just throwing them a couple of meters. Don't know what he's throwing. And it looks like he's firing a grenade or something from his gun, but you don't hear anything. So I don't know. I'm unsure. You guys can probably let me know. So this is interesting. He gets one gun out here. This looks like some kind of AK-47 or an older piece of kit with a wooden section. So chatting with his mate there. So something is that looks like a more substantial havoc. All those sounds. So then he gets that gun out, and then he's basically almost like shooting through this dirt. I don't know whether it's just suppressing fire. Like, is he actually aiming at anything? Can he? If you spend too long aiming, then he gets another gun. Oh, is that the same gun? It might be the same gun. I don't know. It looked like to me before it was a different gun that he had around his shoulder. Uh, and then you get the second part to that. I'll just very quickly go through that, and same sort of thing. And then you think, oh, someone needs to get on that gun. That'll do some proper damage. Um, no, I think he has only got one gun actually. Maybe I was wrong there. Then his mate goes down. He does a small arms fire. His mate's on that much larger gun there. But again, what does all this do? It's just I don't know. Are they actually doing anything by this? I mean, someone would be able to let me know. Does this actually achieve? What does this achieve? Are they ever realistically going to hit someone? I don't know. Don't know. And that's when you say, well, it ends up all being about sort of artillery, really, and like, well, bringing the artillery on these positions, and then yeah, that's what does the damage. Speaking of artillery, here is our good old friend the HIMARS 142 M142 HIMARS at work here. So I've shown you HIMARS before. These are perfect shoot and scoot. So here we've got ground that isn't so muddy that they can't get there because these are wheeled, so they might get stuck in the heavier bits of mud. But the idea is these guys turn up, shoot their load, and then run off again, so to speak. So they fire, and I showed you another video probably 3 weeks ago now of a HIMAR just literally turning up on the side of the road, shooting off its load, and then putting that the back of the rocket mechanism down, and then driving off. And it took less than a minute to like be gone. And of course, that means that they can't be hit by counter battery, which is the importance there, right? Moscow, and this, why do I talk about the shoot and scoot? Moscow has failed to destroy, and this is from Politico, any of the HIMARS launchers supplied, and this has long been claimed to be the case, to Ukraine today, according to a senior US Department of Defense official who asked not to be named. Not one single HIMARS, and yet Russia have claimed to have destroyed more HIMARS than exist in Ukraine. And this is because apparently Ukraine have had a number of decoy HIMARS that the Russians appear to be hitting and claiming are actual HIMARS, but no, the HIMARS just shoot and scoot and do it really successfully. Okay, talking about the mud, I just mentioned the mud here. Just an interesting uh, example of how difficult this guy wouldn't be able to drive down there without the help of that tractor. But then something in front of the tractors pulling tractor as well, I think. But it's everyone helping everyone. But the old tractor brigade being useful for movement around. I mean, the Russian word is rasputitsa for this. The Ukrainian word is I haven't got my math around it yet, so I do apologize to those Ukrainians out there. But the rasputitsa is a real challenge for both sides. And the other thing I talked about the challenges with the amount of light. So you've got half the time to do your fighting, but also, and I was thinking about this yesterday when I was deciding to go out in the garden and just potter around in the garden, and I thought, oh god, I can't be. Oh, it's raining. It's raining. I can't be. It's a bit cold. It's pretty cold. But then it really wasn't cold compared to what it probably is in Ukraine, and probably not nearly as much rain. And I was thinking, the motivation for these troops, right? But on both sides. In the summer months, you'd be like up for stuff. Right, let's go. I'm warm. I'm ready. I'm motivated. We've got a long day ahead of us. You've got a lot of sunshine. Let's go and do this thing. Whatever side you're on. And now compare that with psychologically how they would be feeling now. It's like, right, we've got to do an offensive today. You are cold. You're wet. You don't want to move. You've got a hot cup of coffee that's just keeping your hands warm, and you're thinking, God, we've got to do it now. Like I felt like that just walking into my garden the other day, and it just made me think at that moment. It's like, gee whiz, if I'm that psychologically bothered about walking to the end of my garden, which is a very small garden in the south of England that was just particularly rainy, then what would I think in one of those muddy trenches, getting ready for an offensive? Like would I want to do it? And then does that affect the fact that things seem to have been a lot slower recently than in at the end of the summer and the autumn time? Early autumn. I don't know. I just think it's interesting to think about these different things. Or at least I find it interesting. You guys might not. Um, Right, here is a UK Mastiff. So these are a heavily armored patrol vehicle. They MRAP, so mine resistant to some degree, but certainly patrol vehicle used by the UK, particularly over in Iraq area and Afghanistan. Now these are covered in cages. Now, the joke for the Russians is they put the coat cages on their tanks, and they don't seem to do anything, and the turrets still get tossed. And there's all these memes about copium and coping and cope cages and yada yada yada. What's quite interesting is, so you see these, you think, oh, really? Is that going to do much? And actually, I mean, these are more designed. They wouldn't be so much against maybe the javelin or an NLAW, but for something like an RPG, uh, or these are much more useful. Well, anyway, here is a Ukrainian Mastiff MRAP with cage armor survived a direct hit. That cage armor did what it's supposed to do. So I just thought that was a nice, interesting um, bit of evidence that kind of stuff works. I mean, you look at it and you go, "Goodness me, would that really work?" Yes, yeah, it would, and it did. Okay, this is from the Kiev Independent Accounting Chamber. Russia's damage to, so completely different thing to talk about now. I've mentioned the ecological damage to Ukraine before on several videos. Russia's damage to the Ukrainian soil, air, forests worth at least $37 billion. The Russian all-out invasion has caused more than $37.4 billion worth of damage to Ukraine's environment, according to the Accounting Chamber. Almost one-third of the Ukrainian forests, 3 million hectares, has already been affected. Some of the forests are lost forever, the government agency wrote. Russia, quote, Russia has also turned our fertile black soil into the world's most contaminated with explosive materials land. This, I mean, when you've got a hugely agricultural nation, those fields are worth a lot, right? And I mean, I've shown you videos of the pockmark fields, all the shrapnel, all that metal, all the explosive material, all the leaking fuel, all the stuff that's just littered across the fields of Ukraine in all of these fronts is hugely problematic. Now, it's very interesting, and I did talk about this on a previous video, that China own 15% of the land in Ukraine. They went and bought up a shed load of land over the last 10 years, actually, and not all at once. So over the last 10 years, and they've been doing that around the world. Very sort of interesting strategic decision there. And you try to wonder what are China doing in their positioning. So I talked yesterday about how I think China is they've been seen not to support Ukraine very much, right? So the question is, why is that? And I'm starting to think that actually China will benefit more if Russia loses. Sorry, did I say Ukraine? I do get my words muddled. Sorry, that's EMS. They will stand to benefit more if Russia loses than if Russia wins. So even though they're ideologically more aligned to Russia, actually from their own personal selfish point of view, and they think like this, don't get me wrong here, like this, they have a hugely strategic outlook on geopolitics across the world. You see what they're doing in Vietnam at the moment and all sorts of things, trying to sweeten the area to lay the foundations for attacking Taiwan possibly, and all that kind of stuff that's going on now. They are looking at the world very much strategically. Now, if Russia loses, who's going to go in and more likely to go in to pick up the pieces with the Russian blessing? It's going to be China, and they'll be wanting to have influence in the eastern areas. They've always had, obviously, for geographical reasons and cultural reasons, a lot of affinity for, but also all those natural resources. They're like, oh yeah, we'll help you out, we'll get you back on your feet, but we just want a piece of that, and we want a piece of that, and we want a piece of that. Now, if Russia win this, China will still be doing that to a degree, because Russia will still have to pick itself up. But if Russia loses, there's every chance that Russia becomes even more so a vassal state of China. And I think that's a very interesting dynamic that is at play here. When you're talking about all that land that the Chinese own as providing food for China, right? That Ukrainian land, that 15% of Ukraine's land that they own, they're not going to want nuclear missiles. That's why they keep talking, or partly the reason I think why they keep saying, warning Russia quite publicly not to use nuclear missiles. They do that, you contaminate all that land, and that investment is now worthless for them, right? So they've got really good reasons outside of their alignment with Russia to not want Ukraine's land to be destroyed, and I think got good reason to want Russia to lose. But either way, it's a win-win for China, in my opinion. Um, there you go. Uh, we shall see. Okay, what should we move on to now? Right, this is, I don't know why I've included this. It's just quite interesting to watch. It's some form of like, it's like a kid. It's like, oh, I've got these fingers, these chubby little fingers. There's a plug socket there. I wonder what happened if I put my fingers in a plug socket. Yeah, don't do that. So here we have a, a a mine and a digger, and it's like, I wonder what happened if I stab that mine. Here we go. Oh, bang. Oh, it exploded. Oh, that's what happens. It's taken out most of half of my bucket. Well, go figure, mate. Was it worth it? Probably not, but made for a nice video on Twitter, I guess. Okay, if we're talking about, if we're talking, we weren't talking about, but we're going to talk about it now. These are conscripts. I've shown you plenty of videos of conscripts moaning, but is this gathering momentum? Look at the number of these, and this does not happen. And I believe they're like remonstrating against the officer call. I mean, I don't know what they're saying, but I'm fairly sure it's not. Yeah, we really like what's going on at the moment. Isn't life great? So anyway, it's just another insight into how unhappy these mobilized conscripts are, and how much of an issue Russia have on their hands here. Okay, the Lancet has increasingly, in my opinion, become a problem. I've been mentioning this over the last few weeks. So this is a Russian loitering munition, a kamikaze drone, if you like. Ukrainian M777 here, which is a towed artillery, 155 mil towed artillery, was destroyed by Russian Lancet loitering munition here. And uh, really, Ukraine, as much as the Iranian drones, I just don't know how many of these they have, and I don't know why these didn't feature so much at the beginning of the conflict. They seem to, the Lancet seems to have been causing the Ukrainians a heck of a headache, but much more over the last month than previously, and I just don't know why that is. Is it, have they been able to make some? What's going on there? But realistically, Ukraine needs to do something about this, both to stop the Lancet doing that, but to have their own drone capability to match what the Iranian Shahid drones and these Lancet drones do. Now, the Americans have just announced giving a shed load of Ghost drones, which are they air and environment drones? Yeah. Anyway, made by a company in America. That could be the answer to these, and there's the kind that, well, not the kind, the idea that, or the fact that a bunch of Switchblade 600 drones are also going over. So they're the more potent Switchblade drones. We heard a lot about the Switchblade 300. It's going to be a game changer. It's going to be a game changer. We never really heard about them again. I don't think they were particularly useful. They're only really designed to actually, in the first place, they're not designed to take out vehicles. They're more like to take out individual people. And so they're not particularly powerful, but they might have had some technical issues with them as well. I don't know, but we didn't really hear about them. Okay, let's go to the Ukraine, the latest podcast. Just want Dom Nichols, who's fantastic, uh, giving some uh, discussion about the critical levels of Russian ammunition stocks. and drawing on, I think, what Russians have themselves said, or either that or it's intelligence people talking about Russia. Uh, but I haven't played the initial bit to this, just to keep it shorter. Have you got no sound on that? Oh goodness. Okay, that's a real shame. Okay. I do apologise about that. So let me know. Yeah, no audio. Okay. That's really annoying. So Dom Nichols is basically saying they've got a critical. Long and short of it is, but he gives a lot more chat about that. I'll put that in my update video tomorrow. Um, Massively sorry. Um, but yeah, they've got a critical shortage of ammunition, and this is given that they have made these claims, and other people have made claims about Russia having 10 years, and I mentioned this earlier in this chat, of course. They've got 10 years worth of ammunition storage and stocks, and they haven't. And actually, there are now people very publicly saying that they have, quote, a critical shortage of ammunition. And this then feeds into, less artillery being fired on a daily basis that we've seen over the last few months. They are firing less and less and less. And partly, this is what I talked about the other day, is that partly because they have less ammunition, but also because they have fewer artillery units because of the degradation of their artillery. It could well be both, of course. And then, and this is so something Don Nichols talks about there, which you haven't heard because there's no audio. Duh. Uh, is that and I talked about this with cruise missiles the other day and said they're running really low on cruise missiles. And they said they've got this amount of cruise missiles and this amount and that type of cruise missile and this amount. And some of them they had like still a couple of hundred. And it's very easy to go, well, that's still a couple of hundred cruise missiles. That's a lot of cruise missiles. But you've got to remember that A, they can't make them anymore, or at least not easily. And B, they are wanting to keep a bunch of reserves in case they're going to war with NATO, like a proper thing. If yes, they might have 200 of that type of cruise missile left, but in the whole scheme of things, that's not very many when they have to still consider that they could be going to a full war with someone else or NATO. And if they expend all of their cruise missiles in Ukraine, right, and then go, then have to go to war and they've got no cruise missiles left, they will be absolutely shafted. And that's a really important consideration that I wasn't thinking. I was just thinking that Russia are only considering like Ukraine, very single-mindedly considering Ukraine. It's like, okay, let's use up everything we've got in Ukraine because we've got to win this war. But there are other considerations for Russia to take it to concern themselves with. So yeah, interesting stuff there. That you didn't get to hear any of it. Ha. Okay. Andrew Perpetua says also something like 2% of the male population is involved with the war. You can't hide behind propaganda when 2% are involved. And he goes on to say, actually, no, it's not 2% of men. It's actually 4% of men, 2% of the general population, maybe 5%. What he's trying to say here, like Russia has 2 to 3 degrees of separation from the front line. At this point, probably 70-80% of people have some kind of direct involvement with people on the front line. In other words, this war is affecting Russia as a country, as people, um, greatly. And that is challenging from a PR point of view. Okay. Uh, you look at those conscripts, all of those conscripts in that video I was showing you that you probably couldn't hear the sound to, they're all like chanting. I can't believe you can't hear the sound. I'm gonna have to sort that out. So they're all chanting, and uh, what they will be contacting their families at home on their mobile phones and telling them they're unhappy, and their families are then talking to other family members and friends, and before you know it, you have a spread of this kind of discontent throughout the country in a way that you wouldn't see in the beginning of the war, when everyone was watching state media. They'd shut down all the free media, and everyone's getting served the same kind of diet of information, and you probably didn't get a lot of stuff coming from the front lines, a few intercepted phone calls. Now it's happening all over the shop, and the mobilized troops and their families are not happy. That there is, I think, the risk for Russia of a spreading contagion of discontent that might rip through the country. And that causes the Kremlin further issues. Okay, last couple of things, and I promise I'll leave you. So sorry if it's gone on too long. This is just interesting, just like a bit of you put your foot in it, shot yourself in the foot. An image of a Ukrainian Su-27 fighter was placed against the background of a commemorative plaque to the deceased Russian pilot. So this poor Russian pilot has been shot maybe by a Su-27 fighter, and on his commemorative plaque they've put a Ukrainian version of that plane. Whoever was doing the design just obviously got on the internet and found the first Su-27 they could. Oh, he flies that. Let's put that behind. Could have been the one that shot him down. So that's a bit embarrassing. And you can't hear the sound to this. So there's no point me playing the sound to this. So I'll put it on silent. Anyway, these are Ukrainian soldiers dancing around and having fun as much as can be expected near the front line, to a bit of James Brown. I feel good, right? So they've got it playing out the car. They're having a little jig, and generally enjoying themselves, having a bit of a laugh. And again, good beards. Love a bit of beard action. Ukrainians have better beards than the Russians. This is a known fact. And anyway, just the point of me showing that, I mean, you look at that and say, yeah, why are you bothering to show me that? What does that say? And for me, and I do this quite often, you regular viewers will know this, it's about looking at the smaller details and asking yourself, what does that tell me? And I've seen loads of these sorts of videos of Ukrainians having high morale in the midst of, you know, war. And I haven't seen a single Russian video doing that. Not one. I've not seen anything of any kind of that remotely looks like high morale with Russia. That remotely looks like anyone is actually happy to be there, proud to be there, thinking they're doing the right thing, having the camaraderie with their friends. And I talked about yesterday how those two video shots of loitering munitions that took out two SPGs, two self-propelled howitzers of the Ukrainians, Russian loitering drone took them out. And in both of the ones that the Russians put out as their kind of propaganda or whatever, their kind of look what we've done to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainian guys that are around those vehicles that were blown up went back to the vehicles to get their friends out and to safety. And and that was two from two. And every single Russian version of that I've seen, they run. They get out of the vehicles and they run, and they don't care for their other comrades. And again, it's the little things that tell us a lot, isn't it? Um, yeah. Anyway, that for me is pretty interesting. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. I hope that was of some use. I'm really sorry about the audio that didn't work on probably any of the stuff I played you. So well done, me. I'll have to look into that and sort that out for next time if I do another live. I really appreciate all the support and so many of you being there. Over 400. It's absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much to Chris and to Mitch Mazarol for supporting the channel with their contributions. Really appreciate that. It helps me. Well, it allowed if this didn't happen, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. So I really do appreciate that. But I appreciate all of you with such lively chats in the live chat, you know, hanging out and contributing in the way that you are. Please like, subscribe, and share. And all the ways that you can help the channel are in the description below. And thank you. Cheers from Johannesburg, South Africa, or Mzansi, if you prefer. I prefer whatever you prefer. Seriously, thank you for the live. Lost in France, always a pleasure to have them in the house. Cheers, Jonathan. Thanks for a good stream. Keep up the good work. Thank you all, guys. You are all awesome, at least from my point of view. Some of you may be mass murderers, I don't know, but hey, that went south. Thank you for your very kind words and support. And Uri Bench, who's also a great supporter of the channel, always there and on my videos. So really appreciate that. Thank you for your support, Uri Bench. I really appreciate that. Oh, Cheryl's back in the house, which is great. Anyway, I will be doing my normal pre-records tomorrow. So I'll be bringing out my Frontline update and then a Ukraine update extra video after that. So please look out for that. In the meantime, thank you so much. Stay safe, be cool, and question everything, particularly yourselves. Question your own motivation, question your sources, question me. You know, I've made these claims. Whatever the claims they are, am I correct in what I'm saying? Have I just given you a pro-Ukrainian position, or am I trying to balance it? I don't know. You'll let me know. But in the meantime, you know, think about that. Take care, and speak to you tomorrow.